Now is the time where all of you have opportunities to ask panelists the questions. If you guys like to come on up. To make sure that everybody who wants to ask a question, or as many people as possible, have time to participate, I've got a few guidelines for how this will work. First, please be sure to phrase your question as a question, not a statement. Second is please try to be as brief as possible. If you go on a little bit, I will jump in and sort of kind of rein you in and keep you focused. And to speak, just raise your hand, and we have students with volunteers with microphones. They will bring you a mic, and once you have the mic, you can ask your question. So who would like to start? Over here in the... there we go.
Your name and where you're from.
Thank you. My name is Gabriel Gomez. I study Latin American and Iberian Studies at UC. And the template that you ended with, civil rights as like human rights is health rights. Why is it so difficult for a public administration in a sophisticated country to see that what they're implementing is antiquated and is not up to par with the world we're living in, considering the fact that it's an investment when you save a human life? So what am I missing besides the financial and sustainability part? I don't know, you guys have more experience, maybe are able to answer that?
Yeah. It sounds like you're asking for an explanation of the behavior of this administration. If I'm understanding, so I don't think anyone can answer that question. I mean, why has this country had such a uniquely sort of backwards, relationship to the social and economic, cultural rights, that are, at least as germane as the civil and political rights here? People often point to the Cold War as sort of the genesis of this, right? So in the Soviet Union, like, well, we're going to give away all our, political freedoms and freedom of association and speech and all these things, but actually we're going to have a job and we're going to, get our health care. We're going to have a home. And here, we took sort of the opposite extreme and focused on the civil, and political rights. And so any talk of a right to housing and whatnot, healthcare, was perceived as like a red commie kind of scheme. I think that did set us back. But the Cold War was not just unique to us. So I think it's a much more complicated. The rest of the Western world, such as it was, I think was pretty concerned about communism as well. And they had social democracies that embraced pretty aggressive social welfare programs and whatnot. And there was a history in this country of active socialist and communist party, dating back 100 years ago. So I think that's a much larger conversation, but certainly a relevant one, and personally I believe worth revisiting every day and every minute.
I'd just like to add that, I think it's hard to psychologize this administration. I stopped doing it in month 3, mostly to save my brain. In preparing for tonight, to your question, it's not that often that I take stock of the entire landscape for migrants, new entries, asylees, people who've crossed the border, as well as some of the things that I focused on in my presentation. It's mostly like a self-preservation mechanism. Because last night, as I looked at all of the executive orders that have been signed since 2016, the work of the courts, attacks on even legal permanent residents who, just to get LPR status, you have to have been here for quite some time. My parents were LPRs for 30 years. They're new citizens. Even attacks on communities and families that have been here for a really long time. I have to tell you, it's rather unprecedented. Those of you who are familiar with the moniker of the former administration, right? Obama was often called the deporter-in-chief. There was very clear standards by which that deportation schema was focused. In no universe am I defending it. I'm saying that there was a way in which we could sort of understand, and that made advocacy a little bit easier. We knew the stories to tell, we knew the conversations to be had. One of the most difficult things with this administration is on any given day, something new comes out of the woodwork. Expansion of public charge, as it might impact those folks who do public health work. And then what I actually wanted to raise, which is a redefinition of how we might think about asylees and refugees. The standard by which Bureau of Immigration administrative judges are using to deem someone or grant someone asylee or refugee or even any humanitarian aid status is not only is the standard much higher, the stories that we're hearing from federal courts are literally appalling. Cases that both very similar to the ones that were raised in the presentations, as well as years of cases that would, under a different administration, automatically maybe grant you humanitarian relief or asylum relief. We're hearing are taking years, and folks are often put in deportation proceedings. So this is a really weird moment, and I wanted to highlight that even communities that we think of as being somewhat protected, legal permanent residents, refugees, asylees, who are often statutorily exempt from limitations on accessing state services, it's a whole new ballgame. It'll take years to recover.
Thank you. And I want to thank Gabriel for sharing his name and affiliation. So if the next folks could do the same as well. We have a question. We'll take this one right up front here.
Hi, my name is Claudia. I'm in the Masters of Nursing program. It seems to be that systems of racism and oppression are very, very deep into what causes a lot of this fun stuff, yet we don't tend to call it out as much as we could, should, or would. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, because it's always the elephant in the room and it's really difficult to speak to it, I guess, what your thoughts and or advice would be about having these larger, deeper conversations that really get to the root of why we treat people the way we do.
I'm going to start. I wanted to sort of go there very quickly in the last answer, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the trends that we're seeing. In courts to make this case. I think structural racism, surveillance, they are the pinnacle and the foundation of the immigration system overall. And this administration didn't do this overnight. They had a system with which to work to amp up the pressure on communities, both here in LA, but across the country. And I can't have a conversation about the way in which communities of color live right now in the States without talking about racism. But I absolutely wanted to just point out some broader attacks that are impacting even those communities that we think of as good or safe. I'd love for us to break up this notion that there's that criminalization, and thank you so much to both presentations that highlighted this, is higher in the immigrant community. Absolutely not true. This idea that immigrants are somehow separate from poor communities of color, absolutely not true. And structural racism, I think, is inherent in the way we think about anti-poverty programs, right? So if you have an overrepresentation of low-income communities of color and immigrants, the way in which we think about anti-poverty programs, the way that we address structural racism, immigration and immigrant communities have to be central to that conversation. Otherwise, we're doing a disservice to our policy conversations and also segmenting off immigrant communities in a way that we cannot.
I would also comment that, and this is not to be sarcastic or facetious, but as long as the American voter listens to the pablum that we're being fed by politicians who are using us to gain votes, we continue to feed into, one, a hysteria among the uninformed, and two, a ramping up of the whole issue of politicizing immigration. Only with, I believe, informed voters, and it's our responsibility, those of us that are interested in this subject, only with informed voters saying, no more, we don't care what you say about this or that, We think you need to adhere to international human rights. We are dealing with very severely traumatized refugees, and we need to act like the nation we think we might be. And it's really, much of this is just fear-mongering to get votes. And the only way, not the only way, but the one good way to stop it is not vote for that type of fear-mongering. So it's really a problem for all of those that vote. And the problem for the migrants is many of them don't have the privilege to vote. So they're obvious targets for political gain. And it's something that's really the nation's responsibility with voting and demanding that our leaders are responsible. I can't say they are right now.
Great. Take another question over here. Adrian? I was looking to this side. You guys are up next. If anyone wants to pop their hand up over here.
Thank you again for your presentations. My name is Adrian Bakong. I am a doctoral student here in the UCLA School of Public Health in the Department of Community Health Sciences. So I wanted to ask you a question about the idea and to really interrogate the idea of borders, because this idea of migration is always seen as a problem, but migration is a very big and essential part of human history. If we think about, from the early times of like nomads to now. But I want to ask you a question about how do these ideas of nation states, of the idea of a border, how does that prevent us from having greater collaborations with our neighbors to the north, but also our neighbors to the south? So how does this idea of a nation state prevent these greater collaborations to support these communities that are suffering because of the idea of a border?
Well, in this country, we formed NAFTA, which was purely an economic action that did show the Mexico and North America could cooperate and coordinate. In fact, it was to the benefit of Mexico and North America, if I can say it that way. We really did that to compete with the European Union. The three countries had no interest in human rights or things like that, but the European Union does it quite differently. So one of the answers to your question is to veer more and adopt more European Union attitude of this is North America and Mexico. We're integrated economically. We're now integrated socially and culturally. It's not going to be very possible right now with the friction between all three countries. I believe this is a bias originating from the United States, but it's certainly possible. And so an answer to your question is to recognize that we in the Americas really, if you want to include Central America also, are really all one population, and we need to figure out how to operate. And the model would be the European Union, although it has problems, and I understand Brett X, or I guess she's still in May's predicament, but still, and that, by the way, is related to immigration. So that would be my suggestion. There, as I said in my discussion, there is as much movement probably likely to go south as there is north of this U.S.-Mexico border in generations to come.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm going to turn to the next question. I wanted to make sure this side the room got. You see a hand there, and then we'll bring it back to the side. The young woman's sort of in the back, as we have a mic for her, please.
I think you're going to go take over the mic.
I see you. Don't worry.
Hi, my name is Yaritza. I'm actually an undergrad senior studying sociology and global health. And so I grew up in an immigrant household. I'm a DACA holder myself, and it really wasn't until I got to college that I was able to, do some research and help, my parents find out, what they're eligible for. Because just my upbringing, we relied on emergency Medicaid throughout my whole life. And so I kind of just wanted to ask, like, if CIPC was doing anything to, help undocumented immigrants here in that are already in the U.S. If they're doing anything to, help them, let them know, that they do have some options, that they're not completely ineligible for everything, such as like care credit and things like that. Because it wasn't until I got to college that I was able to, help my parents out and let them know that we didn't just have to rely on emergency Medicaid. Like there are, a few resources here and there. But those few resources are really impactful when you don't have access to a lot of things. Yes, I just wanted to see if, not just CIPC, but any organizations, if, there's any help to, help communities that may not have, individuals like such as, myself, to help them out and, navigate the system.
Thanks for your question. Jessica, right?
Yaritza.
Yaritza, nice to meet you. Organizations like CIPC ground themselves in both advocacy, but also the communities they serve. I would be lying, however, if I said we were great about know your rights for undocumented communities, even though sometimes we are the reason that programs exist. We work with and with the state. So we work with a whole network of community clinics and frontline organizations and ensure that they have the money to speak to folks in the community. It's a failed experiment. We need to do better. I'm the first one to tell you. All of our advocacy for something called One California, which tells people is the legal protective services bucket of money in the state of California. It's the highest in the country. This year we got 75 million, and it's not even close to what we need. Built into that bucket is know your rights and training money for organizations on the ground. Like I come out of legal aid. It's really important that people are in the community talking to their doctor, their clinical provider, their lawyer. There's a cross-section of issues here. One, it's making sure that resources exist for both funding but also people in communities. But there's also like a trust issue, right? So my parents lost their status when they first arrived. Then it was a different time. They were able to become LPRs. They're new citizens, and my mom got caught up in the audit system of new citizens. She had to resubmit her immigration application to become a citizen. I'm her daughter. I came out of her, not to be super graphic about it. She did not tell me. She did not trust that there was enough information and resources. Maybe it was also about like, you don't want to bug your kid. It took a year to resolve. I think your point is a really good one, which is, are there places and depositories for people to get information? Yes. Are they good? I don't know. On any given day, I might say no. But it's part of our fight. So I would encourage you now to take this moment of becoming a conduit maybe to your family and learning as much as you have to just make that a part of your, movement building work.
We're going to take one last question, just hopefully very, very brief. I'm feeling a lot of pressure of who to call on, but Michael's been very eager up front, so we'll go ahead and you can wrap it up for us with one more question.
Call me an eager beaver. Hi, I'm Michael Rodriguez, and I'm a faculty member in the School of Medicine and the School of Public Health. And thank you, Maria Elena, and great panelists here for excellent presentations. Presentations like this sort of bring you down to a certain degree because of the challenges that we face. And I'd like to sort of flip it, or maybe build on what you just said about sort of what you're doing, what CIPC is doing, but also what other things are doing. I think that one way to mobilize the distraughtness or pain or frustration that many of us are feeling is to mobilize it towards action. And so I'd like to sort of ask, perhaps the panel, to talk about in what ways, where can we channel our energies so that we can contribute to the movement that, CIPC is part of with NILC and the whole protecting immigrant families and all of that. But it's not just there. It's there. It's in UCLA. It's along the border. I mean, what else can we do for those of us who want to leave from here with some thoughts about things that we can do and ways that we can join the movement?
Thank you, Michael. I think what I'll propose so we can gain insights from each of the panelists, but also end on time, is if each of you could just give us one one point on one area that you recommend that folks here tonight can focus on, recognizing that there are many, but sort of what comes to your heart and mind. Dr. Stratton, if we could start with you, and then we'll work our way down and finish up with Almas.
I believe that political action by intelligent, informed individuals is very important. And along with that, really, as I was talking about earlier, one of the things in public health we pride ourselves on is our public health messaging. We ought to apply those skills to not only public health messaging, but political action. Very difficult because there are many things that, different groups that are contributing to politicians, but in the end, it's votes. I've come down to the feeling that unless we vote against idiocy in our leadership, we're doomed, not to be melodramatic.
Thank you. Dr. Richards, a final thought for everyone.
I was going to say kind of the same thing, but I would just look to yourself and say, what are you most passionate about and really best at? Because I think that is going to be the way that you're going to, find an outlet. That was what I was kind of trying to highlight. I mean, if you have any relationship to, public health, medicine, law, there has been an explosion. I mean, this is a positive outcome of the resistance, such as it is. People were taking a nap under Obama. We had our guy there, whatever, despite all the challenges and the reporter in chief. But people were asleep. And folks are now waking up. And the demand, it was the third try that I got the asylum clinic started here at the med school. And it's no coincidence that it happened under this administration. It still took me a year and a half, but so if you're a researcher, if you engage with communities, if you have access to politicians, that some of us do, we can help write legislation that help to turn it around. I think we make the biggest impact when we build on and leverage the skills that we already have, instead of just like trying to do something like completely new. To keep in mind, speak out when you hear people talk about racism. The smaller battles, like as a white guy, I find myself sometimes in a room that's all white guys. If you're not a white guy, you never find yourself in that position. And I have a duty to speak out when people are just talking mad nonsense. And so I try to do that, no matter what the risk. Who wants to be in a room with all white guys anyway?
Thank you. Almas.
Now it's on. Ooh. I couldn't echo my panelists emphasize what they said more. So this is new for me, but I'll be brief. I am the person maybe on the panel that spends time talking about calls to action, and I was like, I don't know how to answer this question. In your field, wherever you work, whatever you do, there is, right, perhaps you follow your passion and figure out what makes sense in this political moment. I agree, have brave conversations. If you're in this room, I might also suggest that you take care of yourself in this moment, because you need to outlive this one to see the next one, and that's part of your work.
Incredible words to end on. I want to thank our panelists and all of you for your questions. I'm going to hand it back over to Mike, who will send you all off for the evening.